Thank you very much, and thank you to the Commission and to the CSS for inviting me here. It's an extremely good opportunity and a privilege to talk about this platform from which we expect so much. So I will tell you a little bit first. About where I work, which is the Norwegian Agency for Lifelong Learning, BOX, and a little bit more also about the European Basic Skills Network as a base for what I can tell you about EPALE. So don't worry, I'm not going to talk an enormous amount of time about this. But since we actually talked a little bit previously today about the importance of not constructing silos in our policy, I think it is important for you to know that the Norwegian Agency for Lifelong Learning, even though it belongs to the Ministry of Education, actually works for other ministries. So we're very proud in Norway, and we do have this new tucket skill called showing off. I'm very good at that, so I will show off Norwegian policy by saying that we have this agency as a tool for a cohesive policy, in the sense that by working for different ministries with anything that has to do with adult learning, we are able to move a little bit away from this silo thinking. It's not perfect, but we're getting there. Our main goals are to contribute to supporting both active citizenship and the possibilities of the individual for participation and employability. So we think it is important that all these targets go together, and that's why it's very interesting that adult learning in the Commission has moved to employability. We have both a foot in inclusion and in education and employability at VOX. Our fields of work are varied, but they all have to do with adults with low levels of education mainly. That is our priority. So we work on basic skills for adults, on immigrant education. We do research and analysis directed to these fields of work, and we run and implement national programs for that sort of education, and validation of prior learning, career guidance connected with this, and of course also international cooperation. We are the national coordinators for adult learning in Norway, and we are also the NSS for EPALE. So everything sort of comes together. We were also the initiators of the European Basic Skills Network back in 2009. And I need to tell you a little bit about this network, which has, as was said before today, been in the EPALE process actually from the bidding process. So we know quite a lot about why we want to be part of it. The EBSN is an independent network at European level, but also with partners outside of Europe. And what makes a network unique is that we address both policymakers and what we call policy providers. So that was the very interesting discussion before the coffee break about how to influence policymakers without annoying them. It's because we can have people in the same network from those two areas where sometimes there has been more of a fight than a cooperation. Advocacy leaders in adult learning and policymakers who know the difficulties with finances, with structures and everything. We want to work with policymakers and with the level right under the implementing agencies, the research institutions who provide evidence base for policy, the big national advocacy organizations of NGOs for adult learning, unions, whoever is at a certain, at policy level, but maybe not the policy makers, but the policy providers. And those are our members. Our objectives are to create, I keep forgetting this, it's to coordinate and create consensus, create cooperation and synergies so that we actually create knowledge together. And that we are doing for the whole area of basic skills, which is at the heart of the new agenda for adult learning, the renewed agenda for adult learning in the Commission. So we think it is a very important field of work, and we want to foster research and development to enhance the quality of provision, very especially, as I said before the break, also through teacher training, through good systems for the continuous development of teachers and also for initial teacher training in this area. I'll talk more about that later on. And anything that is enhancing synergies. We joke in the EBSN that our motto is maximum of outcome with minimum of input. If we can, we are all very busy. If we can just put together what we are working with anyway and create new knowledge, create sharing, does it sound EPALE-ish to you? It is. This is why we want to work with this. The skills that we work with are literacy, including also the very initial literacy, for instance, for our immigrants, and numeracy, oral communication, digital competence, which is extremely relevant to EPALE. And it is extremely necessary in adult learning today, because without digital competence, you are already excluded. And the problem we have is that our teaching staff are not extremely digital competent. So that's one of the issues in adult learning today. And also second language learning for immigrants. We are probably, after today, we are going to have to include stealing, dreaming, dancing, and showing off. So we understand that it's a basic skill for the teacher training profession, at least. Our strategy has been all the time organic growth, because when I say it's an independent network, you can translate it into your mind. There's no money no European money making us work, so it's really independent. But that's why it has grown slowly and organically. But by creating networks of already existing national networks, we do have quite a lot of impact. And synergy and informal cooperation, that is really what makes it work. And I have just added this work in progress, but I'm not going to take time to explain all the items. I just want to go on to the one that we think is most important for EPALE. The EBSN Academy intends to be an initiative where we will contribute to capacity building in our target groups. And if you remember what I said, that it's not really the teachers that are our primary target group, but policy level researchers, teacher trainers. So what we want to do is to be able to put together the existing knowledge in those levels to help each other construct better policy, to help each other create better systems for initial teacher training or for continuous professional development of the teachers, to help each other set up good systems of provision. So it's at system level, because we believe, I believe, but I think the whole network agrees, that in the history of adult learning, too much responsibility or too much burden has been placed on the shoulders of the practitioner. We ask the practitioners to be continuously motivated by new things, to find new methods, to get in touch with each other, but then when they try to develop things, they are stopped by a low ceiling of not enough finances, not good enough structures, not good enough understanding at policy level. So we think that we need to start developing and enhancing the quality of adult learning in Europe at another level. And eventually, the teachers will be able to develop much better too. So the Academy is at that level, and we joke about what we call the airport terminal system. There's the T1, T2, T3, T4. The T1 is the teacher level, T2 is the teacher trainer, and there are lots of T3s now in this room. The people who actually are in a position to do something about the teacher training systems in their country for basic skills. And that is the level we want to address. So, why is EPALE important for the EBSN? Because there is an enormous overlap of objectives. EPALE is about synergies. EPALE is about not having to invent the wheel again. And for that, we need to know about what we are doing together. It is about constructing new knowledge by putting together the knowledge we already have. And there is an enormous potential for the EBSN Academy. We had been thinking of how we would use the MOOC approach, which I always joke that in our field it's probably an OOC, because the masses are not there, not for the teachers, but to try to set up very flexible, asynchronic, very modular systems for continuous professional development of teachers. And we were thinking in those terms and creating workshops, face-to-face workshops, and thinking of how we would gather documentation when EPALE came around. And it's a perfect platform for this kind of activity. So we think that EPALE can help us in our objectives long-term, and we hope that it will be a very important forum for the level we are addressing, the policymakers, the researchers, not only for the teachers. And also because we are very, very engaged in this digital competence idea, I think that we need to realize that EPALE is not only a place where we can talk about adult learning, but it will be a place of learning for adult education staff, for adult learning staff. Because unfortunately, I think you will agree with me that a lot of extremely good, extremely interested, very experienced adult learning teachers are not digitally competent enough, not by a long run. So we need to use EPALE as a sort of training ground. If they can find ways of becoming more competent through something that is a digital platform, maybe we can manage to make them see how they can use ICT and OERs for their own learners, for their own students. Our contribution will be mostly in the way of this fora, which I think we need, because one of the challenges involved in this magnificent vision, which is EPALE, is that adult learning is so heterogeneous. And if we want to motivate the staff to come to EPALE and use it, we need to give them very specific objectives. So instead of thinking of it as one community, I think we should think of it as the nation of adult learning, with many different cities and villages and families, so that you find your partial community within the big community. Otherwise, you're going to be lost. So it is important that we create this fora of discussion, which I think will be the most important part of EPALE, and it's the feature that is not yet there. But I think those fora of discussion will be a place where you can link everything else that is in EPALE. You can tell people who share your own interests because they are in this fora, that there is a resource there, and there is a research article there, and there is an event coming up. Look at these, and these, and these, and put it together in something that makes sense for their objectives. We are also producing blog entries, and one of the things that I also think is interesting and was mentioned earlier today was getting out of the European fortress. We have associated members in EBSN in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Argentina, and that is growing, and we hope to be able to contribute relevant input to EPALE from outside Europe and the other way around. So we are thinking of establishing a MOOC-ish approach. Thinking the fantastic thing about MOOC is that you don't any longer need to think of structure a curricula, a beginning and an end. It's that the knowledge is out there for free. And if we can use the resources that will be put in EPALE to create the building blocks for many different sorts of training for the teachers, that they can take at their own path. Because our teachers are very busy. You cannot, I was talking to a headmistress from an adult education center here today. I said, yeah, they can say, yeah, I want to go to this course, but then they will tell me, take me off that class, because otherwise I don't have the time. But if we can tell them, follow this discussion in EPALE for at least half an hour per week, and show me documentation that you have made contributions in half an hour per week during a year, you have got some professional development that doesn't take a lot of time. It's the asynchronic element of EPALE that I think can help us with a flexibility that we haven't had until now. So we are going to create webinars, discussions, and courses, and to connect them to social media and different groups so that people can create their individual paths. It's not going to be easy, but that is our vision. And there is where you come in, because we need to get you involved in giving us ideas about what sort of courses are needed, what sort of people can provide us with building blocks for the courses. You might want to host a webinar. I was thinking of, I love those four, I'm going to call them the Tucket skills from now on. Those 4 skills that Alan mentioned are beautiful, but I want to add a 5th one, and it is carrot agriculture, being able to provide carrots. We all need, if we are going to make EPALE work, we need all to be engaged in identifying the carrots for the target group we represent, finding them in EPALE, and marketing them. So it's the carrot agriculture is going to be the Sbertoli skill. He's got the tucket ones. And I want the carrots. So you can be knowledge provider, you can be course organizer, you can tell us what your people need so that we can really create the EPALE Academy. And what are our expectations? Well, obviously, we agree with the Commission. Yeah, we want this to be the hub of adult learning, but it needs to be dynamic. So we have great expectations for how we can really engage. And we had a discussion in the break about the blogs, how we can make the blog community more provocative so that we actually make people comment. It's beginning to happen. It's beginning to happen. But we need to be careful that the threshold to comment is not too high. Because if we want to engage a community that is already very busy, and if they feel that if I'm going to comment this, I need time to prepare my answer, I don't have that time, I don't answer. But if it can become a tweeting, if it can become something with such a low threshold as Facebook, where you can even joke about the blog, but you just say something, then it will be a dynamic community. So that is what we dream of, and where there are clear contributions to enhance quality for teacher training, as I said, and that it can be relevant to all the many, many different types and levels of educational staff. This heterogeneous quality of adult learning is an enormous possibility, but it's also a challenge. So that's what we are expecting. And it is really, oh, I had forgotten to cross, we're there. It's a tall order. I mean, it's an enormous vision. It's very ambitious. It is going to be difficult to attain, but we need to remember that this is Web3 time. I have some famous last words in my history as an adult learner, adult learning specialist. When Web3 came, I said, why on earth should we involve ourselves in creating the content for the World Wide Web when there is so much incredible information? I'm in Facebook up to my ears. We are creating the content together. This is the time to create content together. So EPALE is not up to CSS and the NSSs and EBSN. EPALE is something we need to construct together. And all of you have been chosen to be here because you can contribute to EPALE. And if you are good carrot producers and you are good users of EPALE, we will be able to do it. So thank you very much.